This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Agun Erev Shabbos, everyone. We prepare for Parshas Pinchas, which is the first week of the 3 weeks. And it's always interesting to me, the idea that even though a particular Parsha is not really designated for a particular Shabbos. In other words, the Gemara in Megillah only tells us about a few Parshios that they have to be laned at a specific interval. The Gemara says that we have to lane the Teichacha of Kisavai before Rosh Hashanah, and we have to lane the Teichacha Bechukaisai before Shavuos. That's all we know about the Parshios. Every other Parsha does not have to be scheduled at any time. And the Gemara there says, but before the year is over, we want to apply the rule Tichla Shana V'Kiloiseha. So as the year is going down the drain, we want to throw the klalos down the drain along with the year. And Tosfos says, well, actually, we don't lane Bechukaisai right before Shavuos, and we don't lane Kisavai right before Rosh Hashanah. There's a week in between. So Tosfos says, okay, we need to give a buffer. We don't want the Teichacha to be too close to Rosh Hashanah. But one would not necessarily think that the Parshios of the year are connected to the Zmanei Hashana, because they're not specifically designated for them. But nevertheless, we have a principle, Davar Be'itay Ma'yafe. The Shlach HaKadosh says that whenever you read a particular parsha, it must be the hashgacha is such that the hashgacha is such that it is connected to that particular time of the year. So I want to examine a major connection between Parshas Pinchas and the Bein HaMetzarim. Hashem should give kayach. Maybe once the Svarim are done on Ala Torah, I would like there to be a sefer just showing how each Parsha is connected to that Zman of the year. There's an amazing observation in Parshas Pinchas. I was not able to find the makar of this. If you look by all the Yamim Tovim, the karbanos of all the Yamim Tovim mentioned in Parshas Pinchas, you'll notice that between each Yom Tiv and the next, there's a Samach. Okay? So if you begin with Perek Chavches Pasuk Tezayin, Uvachodesh Harishayin Be'arba Asar Yom LaChodesh Pesach LaHashem. So Pesach, and in between Pesach and Shavuos, Samach. And we're going to skip for a moment Perek Chavtes, in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Samach. In between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, Samach. There's a Samach in between all the Yamim Tovim, except for in between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah. In between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah is what? A pay. In between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah is a pay. So, why is there a pay in between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah? All the other stops are a samach. So we're going to come back to that. The Oiv Yisrael, the Abdarav, mentions, and he establishes a connection between Parshas Pinchas and the Bein HaMetzarim, that all the Yamim Tovim are mentioned in Pinchas, and why would we read about the Yamim Tovim during the Bein HaMetzarim? Isn't that interesting? So the Oiv Yisrael says the 21 days between Shavas B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av are really the source and the root for all the Yamim Tovim of the year. Because if you add up all the Yamim Tovim of the year, it's Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, the 7 days of Pesach, Shavuos. So we have like this: Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, plus 7 days of Pesach is 9, plus Shavuos is 10, plus 2 days of Rosh Hashanah is 12, plus Yom Kippur is 13, 8 days of Sukkot is 21. So the 21 days of the Bein HaMetzarim are the root of the 21 days of Yom Tif. And the remez is, Ach Toiv Li-Yisrael. 21 is good for Israel. It's an amazing thing. Why would the Yomim Tovim be rooted Why would the Yom Tovim be rooted in the 21 days of the Bein HaMetzarim? But that is the teaching of the Oyev Yisrael, that the 21 days of Yom Tif are rooted in the 21 days of the Bein HaMetzarim. And therefore, really, the 21 days of Yom Tif are, the 21 days of the Bein HaMetzarim are really festive days, but they've been dimmed, and we're not worthy of them. By the way, this fits in very well with the idea that really all the fast days are days of the seeds of the Malchus Beis David. Shivas B'Tammuz was the conception of Oived. Tisha B'Av is the birth of Mashiach. Asar B'Teves is the conception of Mashiach. But when we're Zoicha, we will be able to transform this time of the year into Yom Tif. That means the 21 days of the Bein HaMetzarim will in the future be 21 days of Yom Tif. The biggest Yom Tif of all will be Tisha B'Av. So therefore, it's very important to read the Parsha of Yomim Tovim during the Bein HaMetzarim and Pinchas, because this time of the year is the time of the year that will be the greatest days of Yom Tif. So don't think the Yomim Tovim is not a relevant topic to the Bein HaMetzarim. No, number one, the 21 days of the Bein HaMetzarim is the source of all Yom Tif, and it will be transformed into Yom Tif. Okay, hang on to that, because we're gonna end off with something incredible. It's not even on the sheet. The Bnei Yissaschar points out in a Shana Pshnuta, Chukas and Balak are separate, Matos and Maseh are together. By the way, even in an Ibriyar, like this year, Chukas and Balak are separate, Matos and Maseh are together. Why? Why don't we put Chukas and Balak together and Matos and Maseh separate? So the Bnei Yissaschar says the reason is we do whatever we can to read Matos and Maseh and Pinchas during the Bein HaMetzarim. Because Matos and Maseh talk about distributing Eretz Yisrael. And at Parshas Pinchas also talks about the distribution of Eretz Yisrael. La'ela techalek ha'aretz. And Parshas Pinchas also, it's mevuar the chalukas ha'aretz. So therefore we do whatever we can in order to schedule Pinchas for the Bein HaMetzarim.
Eretz Yisrael, aren't they reading the Shabbos? Isn't this the Shabbos that we catch up to them?
Yeah, well, in Eretz Yisrael, they're both. I'm not sure.
1 week ahead of us.
Yeah, but the question though is, his question is, why do we put together Matos and Maseh and separate Chukas Balak? We should do the opposite. Put Chukas Balak together and put Matos Maseh separate. The answer is because then we would end up throwing Pinchas out of the Bein HaMetzarim, and Pinchas talks about the distribution of Eretz Yisrael and about the Yomim Tovim, that these days of the year, as Oyev Yisrael said, are destined to be transformed into Yom Tif. Another connection between Pinchas. So far we have the connection of the Parsha of the Mayadim. We have the connection of La'ela Techalei Ka'aretz, the distribution of Eretz Yisrael during the Bein HaMetzarim. And the other thing is, what the whole subject matter of Pinchas in general, Rabbi Pinchas Friedman says, is connected to the Geula, because as we know, Pinchas is Eliyahu, and he's the one who's going to be Mevaser the Geula. So really, the very beginning of the Parsha of Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen Heshivas Chamasim Yal Bnei Yisrael, and Hashem said, Lachein Emar Hineni Noisin Layas B'si Shalom, and Targum Yonas ben Uziel says that God is promising Pinchas he will be Eliyahu, and he will be Mevaser the Geula. So what could be a more appropriate Torah reading for this time of the year, for the Bein HaMetzarim? What could be a better way to kick off the Bein HaMetzarim? Pinchas is vouchsafed that he's going to be the one to be Mevaser the Geula to Klal Yisrael b'soif Yamav. So really the entire Parsha of Pinchas is connected to the Bein HaMetzarim, starting with Pinchas, in other words, sort of as a refuah before the Makkah, namely that the Rebbe Shem says, don't worry, it's a Zman of Churban, I'll send you Pinchas, and Pinchas has promised he'll be Eliyahu. Then we have the distribution of Eretz Yisrael Benachala, and then we have the Yomim Tovim, which the 21 days of Ben HaMetzarim are their Shirish to the Yom Tovim, and the Ben HaMetzarim will be Yomim Tovim. So my good friend in France, I think we're going to see him, Rabbi Rafal Ansel, and I printed this in the English book, The Darkness and the Dawn, even though this is not, I cannot find this in print anywhere. From the Rizhiner Rabbi, I did not see in the Irin Kadishin. He says as follows. This explains why between all the Yomim Tovim, in Parshas Pinchas, there's a Samach, but there's an opening between the end of Shavuos and the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, indicating during that time of the year, between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah, we leave it open for some other days to enter the realm of Yomim Tovim. What's in between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah? The Bein HaMetzarim. The reason why there's a pay between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah is because that is not a Parsha Sesuma, it's not sealed. The other Zmanim are sealed, they're closed, nothing can be added. But as opposed to the Zman between the end of Shavuos and the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, that time of the year is open, so that we should be zoicha that these 21 days will be Ach Toiv Li Yisrael, and the Tzoim Haravi, and the Tzoim HaChamishi, and the Tzoim HaShavi, and the Tzoim HaAsiri, Yeh LeBeis Yehuda, L'Sasain, U'Lesimcha, U'Lemayadim Toivim, V'Ha'emes, V'Ha'Shalom Ehavu. So I think that's really a wondrous remez, why it's a Parsha Psucha between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah. Okay, that's Shiur number 1.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.